Welcome, everybody. We're here for another one of Research Talk's qualitative conversations. Today, actually, my colleague Paul Mihas will guide us in conversation.
I'm Paul Mihas. I'm a member of the ResearchTalk consulting team, and I'm also a qualitative researcher at the Odum Institute at UNC Chapel Hill. Today, we're talking to Maietta and Kevin Swartout about their course coming up at QRSI this summer. The title is Data Analysis Tools to Adopt in Any Qualitative Inquiry Project. This course will be on July 23rd. Before we get started, I wanted to kind of give people a chance to introduce themselves. And let's start with Jeff Petrozelli.
Thanks, Paul. I'm Jeff Petrozelli. I'm with ResearchTalk as a qualitative research specialist. Been with ResearchTalk since 2001.
And Ray and Kevin, do you want to just say a word about yourselves before we dive into some questions?
Kevin Swartout. I'm a qualitative inquiry specialist and consultant with ResearchTalk, also a research professor at Georgia State University. And yeah, I've been collaborating with the ResearchTalk team for about 20 years now.
And I'm Maietta, president of ResearchTalk, and we are all part of a team along with Allison Hamilton and Kristen Black, who are not with us today, who have co-created and co-authored articles about the sort and sift, think and shift data analytic method. The subtitle is Let the Data Be Your Guide.
There's a variety of ways that you can go about analyzing data. In the class, we'll cover things, memo writing, diagrams, what we call episode profiles, which is really a holistic picture of each data file, each data event, if you will. And it's really having that flexibility to use kind of what you need when you need it. And so again, as you mentioned, Ray, it's not necessarily a step-by-step process. It's sort of, you kind of just get a feel for what works when. And we also talk about the word play, P-L-A-Y, in our analytic work. And using these different tools gives you kind of an opportunity to play with different ways to look at your data. Play is a very active term, and we use that intentionally. It's not, obviously it is work, but we want it to, we want it to be fun. We want it to be enjoyable. The work we're doing is very important, and we don't want to just think of it as a task that, needs to be checked off. That idea of play is very important as we discuss these different tools. And again, it's really just giving you different ways to look at and work with your data. We talk about getting a good view of your data or getting a different view of your data. And sometimes coming at a problem from different angles gives you different perspective, and that kind of helps you get to the end.
We shouldn't probably just have one way of analyzing our qualitative data. Qualitative data, they're different. They have different sources. They come from different people, different populations. So we want to have just as varied of a skill set and a tool belt, again, to be able to analyze those data and, kind of quote unquote, the right tool for the job, the right tool for each kind of qualitative project, each phase of your qualitative project.
One of the things we're most proud of and we found the most fruitful about the toolkit is episode profiling. And an episode is simply, I interviewed this person, Mariana, from 11 a.m. until 12:30. And I want to give a profile of that, not simply a summary, because a summary can be dry. I want to give a feel for it. So if we're on the same team, Paul, you don't have to necessarily re-listen to the interview if we're sharing responsibility, but you can get a feel for, all right, so this is what happened in that experience. So episode profiling really sets as a goal and a priority, as important as anything else we do in analysis, to think beginning to end, think of the whole story.
I can talk through kind of another tool, if that's all right, which is kind of the diagramming tool, but also sort of, I've used it in my research also as sort of an episode profiling kind of feature. So we had just a small pilot study looking at children and the parents of those children who had undergone pediatric radiation therapy. What we're trying to do is use the data to design an intervention for those children so that they wouldn't have, such a emotional response to the experience, the intake interview, the radiation therapy itself, so on and so forth. So all of these children and parents, the children had gone through that process in the past, and they were just talking through their experiences. And we were on a pretty quick timeline, as I know many people who take our courses sometimes are. That's the way the research world works, and sometimes. And we needed to pull out some insights and some findings in just a couple days' time. And we ended up doing exactly what Ray just described, actually, and developing a quotation inventory across our project. And then we used those quotations to create diagrams Then we divided up the diagrams across the quotations from the parents and the quotations from the children, and all of a sudden it was a real aha moment, probably the biggest one I've had in my research career, because even though we were looking at physical challenges that the children faced and the parents' perceptions of their child's kind of physical challenges, what the children were talking about was really more, I think the laser might burn me, or it was really cold in the room. They were talking about actual physical challenges, and the parents were really talking about psychological challenges. Like, I think my child is going to be psychologically changed forever because of this experience. I'm really worried about how they're going to kind of cope with this and things like that. And so that really instructed us, and we used that finding in and of itself to direct us to say, hey, wait a minute, we really need to think through different strategies for educating children about the process and educating the parents about the process. So that's kind of an example from my work about how we can use some of these tools, both the quotation inventory and the diagramming kind of episode profile as well mixed in there, and then come out with a very clear and very actionable direction and decision point that, again, if someone asks us, why are we doing, kind of these, different intervention materials, we can point to that finding. We can literally point to those diagrams and say, it's because the parents and the children are saying two very different things here.
Both of the examples that you've shared kind of bring to mind just the power of nuance and texture and details in quotations, and how you kind of layer up from that and you get like these bigger takeaways.
When you look at the publications we have about the sort and sift approach, we actually don't list coding. We talk about topic monitoring. And in effect, it is what we know as coding. And we certainly talk about categorization, but we think about topics because we like the idea that it gives this flexibility, and the names can evolve, what we do with content can evolve, but the monitoring piece of it is what's key.
You can have layers of analysis. So monitoring topics is one of them, but then hopefully, in most cases, people go beyond just that categorization, like Ray was saying, and find the movement, and then find how you can link topics together to tell a more comprehensive story, a more frankly interesting story from your data, and really draw some actions from it. It's really hard to draw meaningful actions and meaningful decisions from static categorization.
We just had someone, Paul, contact us last week talking about their project, and they're feeling that something is missing. They've lost kind of the spirit and the mood and flow that just made them very excited after data collection, and now that's kind of gone. We'll talk about different angles to take, different pathways that you can pursue, even if you're taking a different approach to analysis, regardless of how you started, a way to kind of reset, reorient, and almost give permission for the data to reemerge in that spirit and the healthy kind of fun way that it started. So that's what we hope.